So just real quickly about SOA software. We're an enterprise company. We enable our customers to secure and scale digital channels, ensuring operational excellence. But we provide API management and SOA governance, and I'm going to talk about that in some detail. We have more than 300 enterprise customers that are part of the Fortune 1000. We're profitable. Our technology is proven. It's unified, and it's scalable. We've been in business for about 13 years. And in the next slide here, you'll see where Gartner has us over all the way to the right in the leaders quadrant. I'm going to step through some of these slides quickly just because they're really background slides, and some folks might have a good idea about who we are, but I just want to make sure I cover some of this real quickly. And this is a list of representative customers. You can see organizations from banking, pharma, insurance, technology, etc. So we serve a large number of sectors. Okay. So this is really what I want to talk about today. Is some of the major challenges that mobile application developers in the healthcare field face, and how SOA products help accelerate development and also provide governance and management of those environments as well. So this is just a couple of issues that I thought were important that everybody could probably agree upon. We've got HIPAA encryption and key management. We've got when data is breached, the high-tech notifications that are required now when the EMR record is any kind of a breach. Role-based access to data. You might have a continuity of care document that contains patient billing information, patient visit information, patient medications, and the receptionist shouldn't see all the data. Maybe that person should just see the insurance information, where the nurse should have access to all the information. Exposing APIs to mobile devices, depending on how a mobile device is certified, even whether it is or it isn't, especially in the case of things that are owned privately, you could be exposing your API to malware that you're unaware of when you don't have control of the end device. You have a large number of consumers of your application data, and they're geographically dispersed. What you really want to do is close cache. You want to do some caching close to the edge of those users, where they're geographically located when possible. Basically, you want to have access to an edge network.
We're sorry for the delay. We'll be with you in just a moment.
I'm not sure what that is.
I would suggest you're able to mute everyone as the host, so I would suggest you might go ahead and do that.
Yeah, Gene, go ahead and press *5. Sorry about that.
The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press #6.
Okay, so thank you. Back to where we were. We want to do edge caching when possible. The next challenge, I think, is one of the largest, if not the largest right now. Integrating data from multiple provider systems. Anybody who's actually done development or design of an application for building EMRs knows how difficult it is, even within a single provider organization, to pull data together to create an EMR, let alone something like a continuity of care document where you really need to span multiple providers over time. A person that lived in California and had an X-ray when they were in their 20s now lives in Texas and had a similar injury, and they'd like to look at that X-ray, but the Texas provider system can't easily access the data in the California provider system. So that's one of the challenges that we're up against today. Mediation. This is really something that most people think of, I think, in terms of data mediation. We're going to talk about protocol mediation and transport mediation as well, but mediation from JSON to XML, you'll find a lot of HL7 data embedded within XML, and you may want to get that into JSON for whatever reason. Being able to control the quality of service of access to your data, you very may likely have different classes of users. You may have internal users, partners, subscribing users, pay users, and you're going to want to be able to provide different levels of quality control and service level agreements most likely. Nowadays, most of the mobile application frameworks are really set up to consume REST APIs and work with JSON. Certainly there's a lot of mobile applications out there that use SOAP and XML, but the trend does seem to be towards REST and JSON. And it's worth mentioning here that, and some of you may be familiar with this, there's a lot of projects that are ongoing that are really targeting RESTifying SOAP services. In other words, putting a REST front end on their SOAP service. And that's something that our platform can do without writing any code, for instance. And I'll show you that when we do our demo. And then, I guess, something that's obviously a big challenge is capturing the analytics, the telemetry, how people are using your APIs, events, and even monetization of that. Again, real quickly here, just to give you an idea of how our platform is comprised of the different products and their different roles. I'll start at the top. We have a product called Community Manager, and you can use Community Manager for a number of things. It's a developer engagement platform. So as an API publisher, you'll publish your API there, and a developer will come there to consume your API, to gain access to your API, perhaps to agree to some licensing criteria for your API. And once those APIs are being used in applications, you'll want some analytics to be able to, again, see how people are using those APIs. The next product is the Unified Gateway, and the Unified Gateway is really at the core of what we do. It's our policy enforcement point. It works with, we have a gateway, we have something called Network Director, we have something called Policy Manager. And what Policy Manager allows us to do is configure the governance of the gateway, okay, and do all the integration of our gateway services there. This is basically where you describe your APIs and services to the gateway. And then finally, Lifecycle Management, which is not the focus of this discussion today. Basically, that's design time governance. And at the end of this discussion, I'll tell you how you can get more information about that if you like. Okay, so from a functional perspective, these boxes represent functional areas of the mobile application gateway. We have mediation capabilities, orchestration capabilities, scripting capabilities, security capabilities, lifecycle capabilities, limited lifecycle capabilities like create version, remove a version, have multiple versions out there. And just one more picture on this right here. This is a picture that shows the policy manager and the network director working together. The term Unified Gateway here is a logical name, and the network director is actually where services are running and being scaled, and policy manager, again, is the administrative user interface and application that lets us set up policies and governance for the gateway. The gateway can run in a number of deployment patterns. Today I'm actually going to be using the PaaS environment. You can run on premises, install everything locally, or you can have a hybrid type configuration as well, where you may run the gateway locally in your data center and the community manager or developer engagement platform in the cloud. So I'm going to get into some of the detail of what we do and the kind of capabilities we provide before we get into the demo here. So these are some of the obvious things we need to do as mobile application developers, in some cases generically, but in other cases, more importantly, in the healthcare field. We need to verify the identity of applications and app users. We need to integrate with existing enterprise, ID access management type products. We can't impose any particular security infrastructure, right? So, or security model. So we need to be extremely flexible, and we are extremely flexible on the types of authentication policies we support, authorization policies, and also out-of-the-box integration with some of these other platforms that, like ActiveX, LDAP, SiteMinder. We can also provide security token server. We also provide OAuth. We'll do complete PKI for you. These are just some of the things that come up when you're trying to secure your environment. So we want to authorize apps to consume APIs. The entire API might have 10 methods, and there are times where that might be fine. You provide access to the entire API, or maybe you just want to provide access to certain operations, or certain operations to certain users. API authorization driven from built-in provisioning workflows that are authorized at runtime using XML access control requests from the gateway. We provide OAuth support. We provide policies that allow you, as I was saying earlier, we can integrate with whatever IAM infrastructure you have or IAM infrastructure you have. And these we have policies that will allow the access of your APIs to be delegated to these IAM services. You want to protect against, unintentional abuse or intentional abuse. You like to provide a content firewall, prevent denial of service types attacks. We have out-of-the-box policies for things like XML and JSON denial of service attacks. I'm going to talk about how when it comes to our scripting feature, there are what you can write special scripts to help you do, for instance, insider attack detection, those types of things. So things that you can do at the content level that you really can't do like an intrusion detection system level. You can use ICAP to integrate your antivirus solution. As I was saying earlier, we provide quality of service policies, SOA and quota, concurrency, throughput, error rate, bandwidth policies. I'll configure one of those and show you how that works. And of course, like standard firewall network denying access rules, we can set those up on a service-by-service basis if you want. And I'll just go through this one real quick. This is just a little bit of repetition of what I had said earlier. Out-of-the-box support for some of these existing systems that you might use to manage your identity and access management policies. We provide a number of policies built in that you can just configure. Okay, and this is just a quick list of those policies. I'm going to demonstrate an operational and a quality of service policy for you. Talk about a script policy. Okay, so of course encryption. We need to be able to encrypt our data in flight and in rest. So data at rest and data in motion, that data needs to be encrypted for a number of reasons, none of which are to be compliant with certain standards. We can encrypt the entire message. We can encrypt certain parts of the transaction. It's extremely flexible. We can encrypt provide transport encryption policies for JMS as well as HTTP. XML message encryption. Within a SOAP message, we can encrypt certain portions of the message if we want. We provide a wide range of ciphers, and we can actually be a certificate authority as well. And we provide a complete PKI key management environment. Mediation. So, I talked earlier about, when we talk about mediation, we really have different types of mediation: transport mediation, binding, content, and policy mediation, really security policy mediation. From a transport mediation perspective, we can mediate across HTTP, HTTPS, JMS, binding, REST to SOAP. You can also, obviously, if you define a REST service and for whatever reason want to expose it as a SOAP service, you can do that. Content mediation, so we can convert and mediate between different content formats and do transformations, which is key in this area, in this field. And also we can do security token mediation as well. Depending, on the framework that you're using in your mobile application, you may have a paging capability built into the environment, but what happens is that paging environment really doesn't have a tight integration with the back end, so you're not really gaining the performance that you want on the back end. You're just reducing the number of records that are coming into the device, which is useful, right? You don't want to make your application sluggish. But we're able to, on the back end, configure certain caching and paging policies. Again, when you have a large number of users and they're geographically dispersed, maybe you have thousands or tens of thousands of users of your application, you might want to do some edge caching as well. And we have, we have an agreement with a large global CDN provider. This is a really interesting and very powerful capability. Sometimes when people see this, they'll ask, and I was at a show last week and people asked about this, said, well, doesn't this really make you an ESB? I would say no, this just happens to be an ESB-like capability that we provide in the platform. So what you're looking at here is a graphical way to create what some people might call a composite service, a compound service. You could even, just with a single service, do all kinds of transformations. But in the case of healthcare, you might need, you have a medical record number that is associated with a patient. And that medical record number is valid in different systems. So now you have to talk to one system to get DICOM images, and another system to get patient visits from one provider, and patient visits from another provider come from this other system, and so on and so on. And every time somebody selects a patient in your application, you have to make this series of calls, perform a set of transformations, and this is a way to combine that and expose that as a single service, to encapsulate that as a single service, or again, what I would probably call as a compound service. So for a lot of people, this looks very ESB-like, and it's something you don't see in other API management platforms. But again, it's a very, very powerful capability. And when it comes to healthcare, because again, we have to talk to so many different systems, this is a pretty useful capability as well. Okay, this is another great capability. So not only did we provide all these policies I showed you earlier, we're extensible. Our policy management's extensible. You can write your own policies, and we provide a very small API, some global variables, and some scripts that you can use. And you can build these scripts inline in the environment. You don't have to rebuild the system. You don't need an SDK. You don't have to distribute a jar file. It's nothing like that at all. It's really, really simple. And you can use a variety of different languages: JavaScript, Groovy, Python, Bean Shell. This picture here on the right, and I'll show you when we do the demonstration, is the script editing window where you can actually type in your own script and save it, and you can associate this script to a particular service. So that's a really powerful capability. You could, for instance, take a look at the message and figure out where the message is coming from. By this time, it's likely that you can see if the user's been authenticated. And there are times where, during an insider attack, if somebody is, most insiders are authenticated, but their patterns of activity are different. So you could write a script here, for instance, to take a look at what's going on with your API. Normally your API, on average, is called, per connection or per user, per IP. Maybe you say it's called 10 times a minute, and you've got somebody who's calling your APIs 1,000 times a minute. That's a good, and they're authenticated. That's a good indication that you either have a problem with one of your programs or you have somebody misusing your API. So you could write a script to detect something like that. That's very, very powerful. These are two screenshots from the Community Manager product that I mentioned. Again, it's a developer engagement platform. It's kind of a social-like platform. It's a little like Twitter in some ways, a little like Facebook in other ways. You've got a wall and discussion boards, and you follow APIs. You can, from within that environment, essentially just have a discussion. You could set up a ticket for a defect. You could set up an alert. It's also really good for people that are API providers, right? If you find that a lot of people are calling or asking you, sending you separate emails about a particular issue, maybe you didn't document it so well, perhaps. It gives you the opportunity to, in one place on the discussion board, you could send out a message to everybody saying, hey, this has come to our attention that people are having a problem with this, and it could actually reduce the amount of time you spend having to support people. It's really the quickest way to onboard your partners. Even if they're internal, if you're a big company and you've got this delineation in your engineering organization where you've got your back-end developers and then your application developers, whether they're mobile app developers or not, sometimes people will use a wiki, sometimes they'll use a blog, they'll use various environments to give you access to their APIs. This is all built in, and it's very, very easy to use, very, very easy to track, and I'm going to show you here shortly. Over here on the right is a sample screen of when you're monitoring the activity of your API. My graphs never look that nice, but again, it's a screen from that monitoring section of the UI. I'm going to go into a demo here. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is about the application that I have here today. So I'm going to show you a mobile web application. I'm using a very popular framework, which is known as Sencha Touch. And what you're actually looking at right now is the Sencha Corporation Sencha Architect tool. It's pretty nice. It's something that a lot of developers are using, and hopefully there are people on the phone today that are familiar with what I'm showing you. But the first thing I want to show you is how do I actually adapt this application to the Gateway, right? So for those of you that aren't developers, trust me when I say this. If you have a service that you're going to consume in your application, chances are you're not going to hard code that URL everywhere and throughout your program. What you probably do is have one variable. Like in my case, I'm calling it the base API path. And I'm going to be using an API that's base path is this URL. So I'll just use this all over the place in my code rather than replicate this URL. Because if I have to change this URL, I don't want to have to change it everywhere in my code. All right, so the URL that you see below this, the one that has been commented out, this is actually where my real service resides. So of course, I'm going to use the gateway, but of course I also have a real service. And that's on an Amazon instance, as you probably could tell. So what I've done to adapt my program is I've commented out this variable declaration, and I now have this one. So all I'm doing is I'm pointing this patient API to the gateway, and that's it. The next thing I want to show you, for those of you that aren't familiar with model view controller paradigms and patterns, the way this basically works is I have a set of models and a set of stores, and for each model represents something like visits, or it might represent a procedure, or it might represent a medication. In this case, I'm going to show you the store for allergy and the model for allergy. So the model is actually the definition of the data structure. And it could be, this is a very simple one. I haven't even added data types to it, but I'm going to let it automatically detect those. So the allergy information I'm collecting is going to have 5 attributes. The allergy store is what actually goes and collects that data and populates that allergy model. And the allergy store has a URL associated to it. And this is it right here. So every store, as I said, has a URL. And what I need to do, or what you need to do if you're the developer, is sometimes dynamically at runtime change that URL. It can't be static, because in this case I'm always passing a different patient ID. So in my case, the patient ID is MRN. So what I'm doing, this is in my store before load event. I'm just simply building the URL string. And as you can see, I'm using that variable that I was just showing you, right? Have the API base defined. So this is pretty much all I needed to do to adapt to the gateway. And I've done